Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. For this series, I've been speaking with Sarah Shippey Copeland and Lauren Magnuson. Sarah is Director, Desks, and Patron Experience at the University of Tennessee Chattanooga, and Lauren is Head of Collections, Delivery, and Access at California State University, San Marcos. This series is brought to you by Taylor and Francis. Now pay attention to those job titles because they're not just important on their own, they're key to our discussion, which focuses on how Sarah and Lauren and their libraries are altering operations to safely maintain services during the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll hear about what they did, how they did it, and what worked and what didn't, and how they adjusted along the way. Now in this final episode, we'll look ahead to the future and predict which of the new procedures and policies are likely to stick around for the long term, and where some tough decisions will need to be made. All right, so let's talk about sort of what's next. And Lauren, I'm just going to go over to you for this question. You're much more involved now in textbook purchasing, and you're also kind of taking advantage of this situation to become far more embedded in the curricula as opposed to simply supplementing it. And I'm wondering if can you talk about how you're using this opportunity to put affordability, equity, and access at the head of the line?
Yeah, I mean, that absolutely drives, I think, not only in this current situation, but I think going forward, what the collections will really look like.
Right.
So as we're taking over the affordability project on campus, we're focusing more on things like, in the past, the project has paid individual instructors for making their courses more affordable. That's sort of the incentivizing aspect of it. And we want to broaden that to make entire departments commit to more affordable classes, or launch something which some other California State University campuses have done, which is these zero cost majors, for instance, where the student can complete their major without ever having to purchase a textbook. And I think these models are going to become more prevalent. I think with this realization that we have now, that faculty are saying, well, I can, adopt something through the library and have my students use that. And then I won't have to spend so much time, let's say, troubleshooting access codes with some of the textbook providers, the way that, the licensing works with those. It has caused, I think, a lot of issues with students not having access to the physical bookstore and having then to kind of juggle all of these platforms. Another thing that has come up more recently across campus is this idea of platform fatigue. I think we're all experiencing it, right, in our work environment, right, with Zoom and having all of these online meetings and, Google Docs and, all of these just different platforms that we have to use in order to be productive virtually. Mm-hmm. And students, of course, are experiencing that as well. So students may have 20, and I know that sounds egregious, but I know we had a student talk to a faculty senate committee meeting recently saying that I literally have 20 platforms that I have to use to complete my coursework. Wow. Because I have to use this Pearson platform for this, and that Pearson platform actually has 2 or 3 other platforms embedded in it that I have to use to do assessments and that sort of thing. And students feel that, very acutely, that they have to use all these different technologies just to complete their coursework. And it's distracting then from the material of the course. And so the library, again, has an opportunity to say, well, if you use our resources, it's single sign-on. There are different platforms, but the functionality is often very similar across platforms. And we can leverage that reading list technology as well to make that entry point at least very uniform for students. Mm-hmm. So I think, taking that departmental approach, advocating for the use of these resources, not only as affordability resources, but also in a way that, mitigates that platform fatigue that students are experiencing. Those are things that we, as campus is becoming more acutely aware of these issues, it's an opportunity for the library to step up and say that we do have solutions to meet those needs.
Okay, excellent. It sounds like both of you have had quite a bit of latitude to make things happen, particularly in some cases with your budgets. But I'm curious how long this can or will last for you both, and whether there are some tough decisions coming up on the horizon for next year. And Sarah, I'll just start with you. I mean, what's going on in that area, and what might be making you nervous going forward?
Well, I think the thing that makes me nervous going forward is how to balance our rotating cohort model
Hmm.
with just the demands of staffing the library. Particularly since I think everyone's in agreement, or most people are in agreement, that it'd be ideal to have our second floor information commons desk reopen. And I'm kind of at a loss, at least at the moment, hopefully not for too much longer, about how to actually make that happen while still ensuring that folks feel supported and safe.
Safe.
With the fact that they report to work on site and work with a community of residential students. And so, yeah, I'm afraid I don't have answers there. But one thing that I think is clear is that life goes on despite a pandemic.
Hmm.
We've had surgeries, car accidents, deaths in the family, and so on, as you would expect, right? Because we're not robots, we're
Hmm.
humans. And um, when all of the extra padding has been removed from your staffing model, there's a limit to how long you can keep that up.
Right.
So that's kind of what's on my mind.
Okay. Lauren, how about you?
Yeah, we've been really fortunate that this particular year, our budget is not particularly affected. It will be, right? So because we have always used a kind of deposit account model for a lot of our collection development. So we have deposit accounts with Gobi, for instance, to buy ebooks, and
Yeah.
Overdrive to buy ebooks. We were able to put some money into those accounts to get us through this year. And of course, the additional funding that we have applied for COVID related expenses will also help in that area. But it's definitely not going to last forever. The CSU as a whole has had its budget cut, and then we also will feel cuts in the library as well. And of course, our main priority is not letting those cuts affect staffing in any way,
Hmm.
because people obviously are way more important than collections. So it's something, collections is an area that can be cut, and so um, we have always taken the approach that we need to kind of wring every last drop of value out of our collections budget, and now more so than ever. There are tough decisions that we are going to have to make. And I think maybe what's making me nervous is not necessarily because I think, we'll have a lot of campus buy-in toward, a cancellation kind of conversation about we're going to have to get rid of some things in order to basically allow the library to continue supporting other things that are a higher priority. I think we'll have a lot of faculty understanding about that.
Right.
But I think it's more like, inevitably, even when you have that kind of understanding, once, like, say we cut a journal, well, that we start to get interlibrary loan requests for those things. And then how do we, a cancellation in one area saves money, but then there's costs in other areas. And so that's really the challenge there is that how do we make the cuts in a way that is totally sustainable? And I don't think I have all the answers for that, but it's something we're going to have to start thinking about really seriously.
Hmm. In the meantime, Lauren, though, I'm wondering if you could talk us about how you're pulling in your campus community to help make the case for, um, in particular, cost per use, and your digital resources. Particularly the less used but expensive databases. Um, last time we spoke, I was really intrigued by the way you're kind of pulling in, the library community to sort of make them aware that, there may be some cuts that you need to make, and um, can they help advocate on your behalf? Um, and I'm wondering how you kind of plan on preparing to do more of that in the future.
Great. So we're definitely going to be doing a sort of public state of the collections budget,
Yeah.
basically a LibGuide that will go out then for, designed really for campus faculty. And this will probably, be presented through our campus faculty senate. and governance structures as a way to provide some transparency over, how have we been? Because we've been underfunded for collections in the past, and we've cobbled together ability to cover expenses, but we've never had really, as long as I've been at Cal State San Marcos, a collections budget that was handed down that totally covered everything that we needed to purchase. We've again cobbled things together, and so having that level of transparency of, look, we've been critically underfunded for many years, and so now this is when we're going to have to make these really tough decisions. And this is, through this public kind of site, these are exactly the cost per use databases that are going to have to be cut, or these are the journal subscriptions that will be cut, and these are the disciplines that will be affected. And so putting all of that out there, and having then a conversation about, well, some of the really high cost per use databases are, they're very expensive, and they're used for maybe this one, let's say, capstone class that really cannot do its work without having access to this resource. So then how can we leverage that advocacy between the department that's using that and the library? There are so many things that faculty who use our resources, don't see, that the library is very good at sort of, hiding, or, not really, we don't really want to bother, right, faculty with all the complexity of how we manage our budgets,
Right.
and how we manage
You just make it happen, basically. Yeah.
Right. We want it to be totally seamless. No worries. We got it. We need to start showing more of that to the campus about how difficult it really
Right.
is, and how much money we really need to make it happen. Because again, we're in this place where we know that faculty need these things in order to teach, and the campus is listening in the way that, we need students to be engaged virtually, and how to make that happen. So yeah, I think that we've already had, we have the calculations in terms of cost per use. We've had that for many years. We've made sure that we've not spent any money that, on anything that's not being used. But now we're getting to the point where something that has even a relatively high cost per use is on the chopping block, and pulling in, especially units on campus that are going to have, quite a bit of pull, and are able to really make a really strong case for why those resources are needed. I think we're going to need to work together really closely with departments to advocate for those things, and just have an understanding about what the library is actually able to do with our limited resources.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So I'm curious, of all the new procedures and policies you've adopted, which among them do you think have longer term implications? And, whether it's a policy or procedure that will just stay in place, or maybe there's a watered down version of it that just continues on, or maybe inspires, something similar. And then which ones will likely go away once things, hopefully soon, return to normal. And Sarah, why don't we start with you on that?
Sure. So I think first I'd like to start with my dream, which is that I'd love for contactless pickup to grow and to actually become established on campus here. I've heard of other campuses where this has worked really well, and this was before the pandemic started. And if you had asked me what was something I would like to bring to UTC, that would have been an example that I would have given. And like any service, I think it takes a little while for it to get off the ground. That said, I think that's more of a pie in the sky hope. In terms of like actual things that I think will continue, we've made a lot of improvements to our hold shelf process as a result of moving to paging items exclusively. And I think most of those will end up staying in place. And this is going to sound really, really simple and kind of silly, but we interfiled our ILL pickups with our hold shelf pickups, and folks seem to really like that because they can just go to one place on the shelf to see what items are waiting for a patron. And I'm sure many of your listeners have experienced that patrons don't necessarily know or remember that, like, how the item that they need to pick up came to be there. They just say, "Oh, I'm here to pick up an item." And so anyway, that's a small thing that I'm sure will continue. And then another big project that we've undertaken is our semester loans of technology. This is not something we've offered in the past, but the university helped to make this happen. It's actually really a university initiative, and the library has helped to make it happen. And we're the ones who are managing the process of loaning items to the students. And I really hope that that can continue, because I think it fills a need that existed even before the pandemic. So I guess it'll be interesting to see how we navigate that.
Right.
And as far as things that'll go away, I'm pretty sure checking out keyboards and mice is going to go away. I also think that we will move back to having our student assistants like actually staffing the desk, at least in part, the way we used to before. And I don't know about other libraries, but we have a ton of signs everywhere. And they're needed. We're trying to communicate new protocols, new expectations, and that sort of thing. But boy, I will not be sad when we can take some of the signs down.
They will not be missed.
Yeah.
Great. And then Lauren, how about your library?
I would say we'll continue purchasing ebooks by user request. I think, further streamlining that and making that easier for students to discover and request those things. We will continue with that. I think one thing about the mail to home service that we've been offering, I think there's interest in not actually having that one continue indefinitely, because the shipping overhead is, even though the library is actually not necessarily paying directly for those costs, sort of campus shipping, but just the human cost in doing it, the work of having to go in and package all that stuff up, and how much work it is to mail to home. Is just a huge workload. So I think we will want to rely on our contactless locker pickup, as well as, if and when in-person circulation resumes, that mail to home service, I think may go away. But I think this digital on-demand service that we've sort of put together is a good one. I think it's developed our collections in a good way. And I'm hopeful that we'll continue doing that. And I'm hopeful that we'll continue, kind of doing away with any other aspects of some of our the practices in the past, things like, again, I mentioned billing users for lost items. I think that's something that, do we really need to do that in an ongoing way? We're talking about such a small number of things, things like that, where, maybe pre-pandemic, it would have been totally bizarre to have those conversations. But, going forward, let's really figure out what's best for the users and what's really manageable and sustainable. Because anything that can go, basically, that we could stop doing, we absolutely need to stop doing.
Right. Yep. Excellent. Okay. Well, that's all the time we have. And so Sarah and Lauren, thank you so much for joining us on the Authority File.
Oh, thank you so much. It was good to be here.
Thank you so much.
You just heard from Sarah Shippey Copeland and Lauren Magnuson. Sarah is Director, Desks and Patron Experience at the University of Tennessee Chattanooga, and Lauren is Head of Collections, Delivery, and Access at California State University, San Marcos. This episode was sponsored by Taylor & Francis. If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice, and if there's a topic you'd like us to cover, drop me a line. I'm at bmickey@ala-choice.org. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced by Choice's senior digital media producer, Mark Dirks, and digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.